There's a race for president of the United States. The current sitting president is running for re-election. 3.5 months from the election, he decides not to run. The sitting vice president then takes the mantle, running against a former president of the United States who had been running for 10 years with 107 days.
People didn't used to get sick of the candidates because you barely ever saw them unless you happened to be standing at the back end of a train. But now we never stop seeing them. The winner in modern elections comes down to who we're...
Bill Maher just went full fireworks on Kamala Harris, and it was absolute comedy gold. Collision: the sharp-tongued host unloaded on Harris's confusion, mixed messaging, and total disconnect from everyday Americans. No filters. No mercy. Maher's roast was fast, fearless, and brutally funny, ripping apart the polished talking points and exposing how out of touch she really sounded. Every joke landed, every jab stung, and the crowd ate it up. This wasn't a polite critique, it was a full-on comedic takedown. If you missed it, you're missing one of the most savage political roasts of the year. You have to see.
Joe Biden was still hanging on to be the candidate. Many of the pundits said that to switch him out this late would cause chaos. Yeah, that was never my position. And indeed, what happened was Kamala Harris said, "Oh, look, I guess it's my turn." And the next day, a grateful nation handed her $500 million. The only reason we stay stuck in permanent campaign mode is money. It's estimated this year that $16 billion will be spent on political ads. It's time we admit that the endless campaign exists only to enrich advertisers, political consultants, and what's left of the...
The DNC never fully reckoned with the risks of elevating Kamala Harris as its 2024 nominee, and the cracks started forming long before her name was ever locked in. Joe Biden's refusal to step aside early left the party drifting without a backup plan, clinging to stability until his disastrous debate performance detonated everything at once. What followed wasn't strategy, it was panic. Harris was thrust into the spotlight overnight, and party leaders tried to paper over the chaos with a flood of money, betting that cash could substitute for clarity and confidence. It didn't. The funding failed to fix the message, calm voter anxiety, or restore trust. Instead, it highlighted how unprepared the party really was. What was meant to look like a bold transition came off as a rushed gamble, a last-minute move with no coherent plan for holding power.
Just getting to know Kamala isn't bad, it's great. Great for her, great for the country. People didn't used to get sick of the candidates because you barely ever saw them unless you happened to be standing at the back end of a train. But now we never stop seeing them. The winner in modern elections comes down to who we're less tired of. They're just constantly on us. TV, radio, the mail, on our phones, texting. Hey, Bill, Tim Walz here. You up? They're everywhere all the time. Jesus Christ, off, let mommy...
Maher pushes back hard against Kamala Harris's defenders who insist voters simply didn't have enough time to get to know her because the campaign was short. He's not buying it, and frankly, it's a weak excuse. Harris had nearly $500 million at her disposal, an astronomical budget by any political standard. That money fueled non-stop advertising, celebrity endorsements, and carefully staged appearances designed to dominate attention. A-list stars with massive followings flooded social media with her face, her slogans, and her brand. Visibility was never the problem. If anything, it was overexposure. Voters saw plenty of Kamala, her message, her tone, her presentation, over and over again. As Maher points out, the real issue wasn't that people didn't know her. It's that many of them were already exhausted by her long before election.
Harris, in her new book, said it was, quote, recklessness for former President Biden's allies to leave the decision about running for re-election up to him and his family. Do you agree with her? Was it recklessness?
Look, I wasn't there, Kristen, on this, and I think the president, again, got us through COVID, ushered us through, brought the economy back from the edge. I think there's question about this, and I want to be very clear. On me talking about the MRI, ageism is a real thing. Ableism is a real thing that we need to be careful of with people. And I think Donald Trump made a cottage industry out of attacking Joe Biden's competency, and it seemed like that got reported.
Here we go again with the dodging. The question was simple, but Tim Walz twisted around it like he was auditioning for a political talent show. Kamala Harris had already made her position clear. She placed the blame squarely on Joe Biden's inner circle, arguing they let the decision to stay in the race rest entirely on Biden himself, and effectively his family. In her view, they should have stepped in sooner, taken responsibility, and spared the party the chaos that followed. Bottom line, Harris sees Biden's hesitation and delayed decision-making as a major reason she lost, but instead of addressing that head-on, Walz pivoted straight to Donald Trump, as if Trump somehow masterminded the Democrats' internal collapse. It was a textbook deflection. Blame the opposition to avoid admitting the dysfunction came from inside their own camp, and that's the tell. When the answer drifts that far from the question, it's usually because the truth is
Decision should have been made sooner. History will determine that. What I do know is that going forward, we need somebody in office who's actually going to tackle the things Americans need, whether it's about costs or whether it's about our national security needs and honoring those with our allies. And I think maybe there's a lesson to be learned from what happened with President Biden. If that's the case, it should certainly be applied right now to this president who is putting Americans at risk, is reckless, and is not doing what...
Here we are again with the predictable Trump obsession. Somehow, no matter the topic, commentators just can't resist dragging him into the conversation, even when he's completely irrelevant. But buried inside Tim Walz's latest swipe at Trump was a quiet slip most people missed. While aiming outward, he subtly turned inward and nudged Joe Biden under the bus. When Walz said there was a lesson to be learned from Biden, it wasn't praise. It was coded criticism. A polite way of signaling that Biden mishandled the transition and should have stepped aside far earlier than he did. That single line echoed a growing frustration inside the Democratic Party. Biden's delay and slow decision-making didn't just complicate things, it helped sink them. So even as Walz tried to distract the audience with another Trump reference, he accidentally reinforced the very argument Kamala Harris and others have been making all along.
Left the door open to potentially run for office again. Do you still think she's the strongest person to run for president in 2028?
Well, I'm glad she's out there, and I'm glad a whole lot of other people are out there, because I think Donald Trump sucks up so much oxygen. We need to have the Democratic Party out on the field, the broad, inclusive Democratic Party, talking about making life more affordable, talking about protecting freedoms, and I think Kamala Harris does a wonderful job with that. If she chooses to run, that betters all of us. We will have the process. We'll go through. I'm sure there'll be a lot of folks throw their hat into the ring, but that's good, and we need to make sure that we're providing the alternative.
Now it's pretty clear why Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz as her running mate. Like her, he's skilled at dodging direct questions, treating straight answers like political landmines. When Walz was asked a simple yes or no question about whether Harris would be a strong candidate in 2028, he couldn't commit. No confidence. No clarity. Just carefully padded words and an obvious sidestep. And that hesitation says more than any statement ever could. There are really only two explanations. Either Walz doubts Harris's future viability, or he's deliberately leaving the door open for the next Democrat waiting in the wings. The first explanation feels far more likely. Harris's rocky 2024 run didn't just end a campaign, it damaged her credibility. Quiet chatter inside the party already paints her as a weak option going forward. Walz knows this. His non-answer wasn't accidental or cautious. It was a signal. A subtle acknowledgement that, behind closed doors, Democrats are already preparing to move on from Harris, even if no one wants.
I think she had a message last year that I'm proud of. I think, did it break through enough? Obviously not, but it's still a message that works, making sure that America is affordable for all, people feel included, and we tackle the toughest problem.
That's exactly Maher's point. Most Americans just couldn't connect with Kamala Harris because her message never felt real or relevant to their daily lives.
Exactly Maher's point. Most Americans simply couldn't connect with Kamala Harris because her message never felt real or relevant to their everyday lives. And it wasn't for lack of opportunity. She had endless interviews, rallies, televised speeches, and national moments when the spotlight was fully on her, yet instead of delivering clear, grounded arguments, Harris often drifted into long stretches of confusing word salad and circular logic. Viewers didn't walk away inspired. They walked away trying to decode what she had just said. Maher's critique goes deeper than jokes. Communication isn't just about talking, it's about making people feel understood. Too often, Harris came across as distant, overly scripted, or trapped in vague rhetoric that aimed for depth but landed hollow. Many voters simply stopped trying to follow her, and when a politician's message starts to feel like a puzzle instead of a connection, people tune out. Maher wasn't exaggerating for laughs. He was putting his finger on a real frustration Harris never managed.
Primary reason do you think that you lost?
There are many factors, I think, that played into the outcome of that election. But I think probably one of the biggest in my mind is we just didn't have enough time.
We didn't have enough time.
We didn't have enough time.
Oh, yeah.
And, one of the reasons I wrote the book is this is unprecedented. Think about this.
Yeah.
that there's a race for president of the United States. The current sitting president is running for re-election. 3.5 months from the election, he decides not to run. The sitting vice president then takes the mantle, running against a former president of the United States who had been running for 10 years with a
point. Many critics see Kamala Harris as someone who adjusts her message to fit whatever narrative best serves her campaign in the moment. Her recent claim that Donald Trump enjoyed a built-in advantage as a former president doesn't really hold up. Harris herself was the sitting vice president while running, a position that should have given her equal, if not greater, political leverage and visibility. The irony deepens when you look at what she leaves out about her own role in the Biden administration. For years, Democrats aggressively targeted Trump with investigations, legal battles, and relentless scrutiny that dominated the political landscape. His fitness for office was constantly questioned, his supporters mocked, and his presidency framed as an ongoing national emergency. Those narratives shaped the entire election cycle. Given that context, suggesting Trump had some kind of unfair edge comes off as misleading at best. To critics, it feels less like honest reflection and more like another attempt to shift blame, avoiding responsibility for a campaign strategy that simply failed to resonate.
Of what is unprecedented and a bit historical about that race, it is the closest presidential race in the 21st century in terms of the outcome.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, say that again, because he likes to say over and over again he's got a mandate.
And that's part of why I wrote this book, because history will talk about this race. It is part of American history. And it was important to me that when history is written, that
Sometimes it's hard to understand the applause surrounding Kamala Harris, especially when she rarely offered anything clear, grounded, or concrete. But the bigger story isn't her struggles, it's why Trump won. His 2024 victory was driven far more by results than rhetoric. He secured 312 electoral votes to Harris's 226, won the national popular vote for the first time in 2 decades, and benefited from shifting demographics and voter priorities. Exit polls showed Trump gaining ground among several minority groups, as well as new and returning voters who were fed up with inflation, rising living costs, and economic instability. For many Americans, this election wasn't a referendum on Trump's personality. It was a rejection of the status quo and growing frustration with the party in power. Harris, meanwhile, failed to connect, persuade, or clearly communicate. Applause lines, celebrity endorsements, and media praise couldn't compensate for vague messaging, confusing delivery, and an unfocused campaign strategy. Trump, by contrast, harnessed economic anxiety, voter discontent, and shifting coalitions into a decisive win. This wasn't just a political comeback. It was a broader rejection of the country's current direction, and proof that clarity, momentum, and strategy ultimately decide elections.